Welcome to Module 2, Session 1, Understanding the Immune Response. We are going to be navigating reactivity in ourselves today. So what are the learning objectives for Module 2? They are these 5 learning objectives that I'm sure Alice has covered. And in particular, we're going to be focused here where these teal arrows are, in growing our capacity as an intervener for transformational change. And this will in turn help us to grow our credibility and our ability to influence business leaders. Specifically for this lesson, for you personally, we will be working towards creating greater self-awareness of your own tendencies, biases, and views in order to better navigate your own personal response to threats and be better equipped to anticipate and navigate the immune response in others. And a bonus is that we will also understand and grow our personal well-being and our carrying capacity, which we really need to do in order to show up at our best in these interventions, and then grow ourselves also as a better intervener with more influence. As interveners, we help others face real challenges and real facts. We must anticipate then that we are going to need to navigate the human response. Facing reality is essential for informing relevant action today, and it will stir up negative emotions because the current trajectory is not good. The good news, I think, is that people who are not paralyzed with fear will be the first movers to bring about a systems change. And part of our role as interveners is to also not be paralyzed by fear and to enable other folks to face reality and also overcome and walk through the fear in order to bring about a systems change. Our goal, of course, is to engage and intervene to enable big business to take radical action now. We can't be afraid of fear. We aren't going to be able to avoid it because we're bringing fear-inducing facts forward. But what hopefully we can do is help others to navigate the human response. The success of an intervention depends on the interior condition of the intervener. Think about that for a minute. We are the interveners, and we want to be successful. But if we come in and we're nervous or we're unsure or we're a little bit and overshoot ourselves, we can crater the intervention by showing up with these characteristics that are not conducive to connecting deeply, thoughtfully, meaningfully, and in a fact-based way with the folks that are in front of us. So in order for me to be a better intervener now and for you to listen and deal with this material and take this material with an open mind and an open heart, I invite you to take a deep breath and look at this beautiful water and these two fishermen. Feel your feet on the floor. Go ahead and lower your eyes if you'd like to do so. Try to relax the tension around your eyes and in your face, around your nose and your jaw. And then let relaxation sort of flow like water down your body, over your shoulders, across your torso. And breathe into the silence. Hopefully you're feeling more calm and centered. I am, and maybe you'll be able to see that in me. Our VUCA world is making us feel less safe and socially connected, and we're living in a high alert state quite often. And as systemic leaders, we've got to learn to navigate, adapt, and even thrive in these circumstances. And we can do this by growing our conscious awareness and being intentional about our response. Our hardwiring doesn't make it easy. So we're going to look at our hardwiring and see if we can use it to anticipate and respond to today's threats in a way that leverages not our physical strength, but leverages our entire head, heart, gut intelligence and our cognitive strengths and emotional health and well-being. So humans ask, and we're always looking and checking to see if we're safe. Are we okay? We have this always on security system that's very action oriented and we're ready to jump in at the moment that we sense threat or danger. Our body triggers quick release of adrenaline and other stress hormones, which induce a fight or flight response and keep us highly mobilized at the drop of a hat, right? At the first sign of threat. The parasympathetic system consists of the ventral vagal function, which is the newest evolutionary pathway of response. And it has evolved to enable us to respond more empathetically and calmly and in a way that's connected during times of safety and when we're feeling socially connected and safe. Conversely, the dorsal vagal is known to be our go-to method in response to extreme danger. This is akin to playing dead in the face of clear and certain death. And it is the oldest evolutionary pathway of response. These reactions tend to be automatic, autopilot. But what we do know is that we can begin to self-monitor and self-manage and make these reactions more intentional. Before we go there, there's a new theory that says that the ANS and the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system are really not quite so separate, that in fact they work together. And polyvagal theory has created this metaphor of the ladder to look at how we handle threats. And so at the top of the ladder, when we're feeling safe and social and engaged, our ventral vagal nerve is activated and we feel at ease and like we can manage anything. In the middle, we're mobilized, agitated, or frantic. And this is where the sympathetic activation comes in, where we're beginning to feel a bit overwhelmed. And then at dorsal vagal levels, we are approaching shutdown, we're approaching collapse. So you can see how our internal systems, in many ways, have our own carrying capacity and our own way of being an overshoot and leading towards at least temporary collapse.
There is a legend I wish to share with you. It is said that a wise Cherokee elder was once teaching his young grandson about life. "There is a war going on inside of me," said the elder. "It is a war between the two wolves. One wolf is evil. He is anger, envy, jealousy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. But the other wolf is good. He is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. Then the elder placed a hand on his grandson's shoulder. This same war is raging within you and within the heart of every man, woman, and child. The young man was thoughtful for a moment and then asked, "Which wolf will win?" The grandfather's reply was simple: "The one you feed." I have learned that the point of life's walk is not where or how far I move my feet, but how I am moved in my heart. If I walk far, but am angry toward others as I journey, I walk nowhere. If I conquer mountains, but hold grudges against others as I climb, I conquer nothing. If I see much, but regard others as enemies, I see no one. Whether we walk among our people or alone among the hills, happiness in life's walking depends on how we feel about others in our hearts. We travel only as far and as high as our hearts will take us. If I was to move forward, I needed to leave all that was backward behind. Whatever you carry that invites a backward walking, leave it behind. Which wolf will win? The one you feed.
Okay. So we're going to be working with these different states within us, and we wanted to play that video for you to recognize and share the fact that we do understand that the current and recent science that we're covering with you on the autonomic nervous system and on polyvagal theory and many of the other positive intelligence work that we'll be unveiling here. This is global north wisdom. This is scientific based kind of ways of knowing. And in many ways, we're rediscovering what the indigenous peoples have always known and have passed down through story and through every generation, including current generations. And so we want to be cognizant of the fact that what we're presenting as new or innovative in some way is not new. It's just our way of rediscovering it and making sense of it for the global north. And actually, we're drawing from some research that comes from both traditional psychology and positive psychology and compiled by Integrative 9 Enneagram Solutions, which we may delve into a little bit more in future modules. And the idea here is that the two wolves, for example, are for the most part under the waterline. Our defenses, our motivations, our core fears, our core essence are not visible above the waterline, nor are we necessarily conscious of them. We can see consciously the behavior of others, and others can see our behavior. and might equate that to personality. But there's a lot that's under the waterline, and we need to dig underneath it in order to have more compassion and understanding of ourselves and the people that we're looking to work with. And as in this Cherokee, I believe, legend, part of our work is to put down our defenses and heal our wounds and move forward with no one as an enemy. But in the meantime, we're working in this world and in this body where our immune system does get triggered. A trigger is an activating event, something that makes us feel like we're under attack because it threatens usually not our physical self, but our self-image, and provokes our blind spots. And that trigger then activates our immune system. And each of us will use a unique and particular set of strategies to protect ourselves against criticism, conflict, and even the pressure to change or innovate. And we do this in order to realize and maintain our idealized self-image. Blind spots sabotage our capacity to intervene. And the interesting thing about blind spots is that they tend to be behaviors that others can see in us, but we don't see. We're unconscious of them ourselves. So habitual thinking or acting that sabotages our influence and impact really can hurt our ability to intervene. And we can show up, for example, with a lot of self-righteousness, with a feeling that we're right and others are wrong. And we may be in this blind spot where we think that we're bringing passion and making a difference. We're actually creating a reaction that hurts our capacity to enable the very change that we want to enable. Some of the ways that that shows up might be defensiveness, blaming, self-righteousness, projecting, stonewalling, fixing, or rescuing. And these are all what we'll come to know as saboteur behaviors. So our work is catching ourselves and shifting. On the left, this is the work of Otto Scharmer and the Presencing Institute. This is basically the bad wolf, or the closed mind, closed heart, absent participant, somebody who's shut down. They're lower on the polyvagal ladder, and they're not ready to listen. They're not open to being intervened with. They're basically in saboteur mode. On the right-hand side is an open-minded, open-hearted, compassionate person with the courage to see what needs to be seen, to see reality, and to sense what's needed next. So in one case, you have absencing and even destruction. On the other instance, you have presencing and co-creation.
Are you choosing curiosity over being right? Brought to you by the Conscious Leadership Group. Find them on the web at www.conscious.is. Choosing curiosity over being right is one of the most important choices a conscious leader makes again and again, moment to moment. The ego believes that being right and proving that it's right is the key to survival. Remember that when we are below the line, we're in a threatened state. When we experience threat, our instinctual priority is to survive. Fighting to prove we're right is fighting to survive. Every drama we're in, no matter how big or small, is rooted in a desire to be right. We want to be right that the supplier should have gotten the product to us on time. Our co-workers should treat us with more respect. The sales team should hit their target. Our 5-year-old shouldn't hit his sister. We should lose 10 pounds. When we are in drama, we're experiencing threat from the outside. We get defensive and commit to proving we're right and closing ourselves off to other perspectives. This threat is a threat to our 3 core wants: approval, control, and security. Being right makes us feel valuable and worthy of approval, a sense of being in control and confident that we are safe and secure. Conscious leaders understand this. They don't make others or themselves wrong or bad for being triggered and for wanting to be right. Rather, they're self-aware enough to know they're triggered, and they accept themselves for being reactive for wanting to be right. Then, they shift. Shifting is choosing curiosity over being right. In drama, we ask questions like, who's right? How can I protect what's mine? How can I maintain my image? How can I stay in control? How can I avoid conflict? Conscious leaders know that these are small questions, and they won't create wonder and curiosity. Wonder questions are not questions that we figure out. When we try to figure something out, we think we're bigger than the question. When we allow the question to be bigger than ourselves, we are in awe. We're in wonder. Children can teach us about wonder questions because they're not focused on being right. They're focused on learning. They ask questions like, how does this work? What happens when I do this? They don't have the right answer. They have curiosity. Leaders ask wonder questions like, what can I learn from this situation being exactly as it is? How would I react right now if I weren't trying to control an outcome? If I told all of my truth about this issue, what would I say to myself and others? How is this situation familiar from my past? When they ask these kinds of questions, conscious leaders breathe, move, and wonder. In so doing, they get curious, and all new possibilities, insights, and learnings emerge. Doing this as an individual is powerful, and doing it together as a team is transformational. So, are you choosing curiosity over being right?
So I hope that you can see that we have some work to do, and there's a lot of rich content here. So we're going to dive into the world of mental fitness because we want to create and nurture, excuse me, your capacity. Well, I guess I had to pause and go get a glass of water. So, um, isn't that interesting? So let's begin again. Mental fitness is your capacity to respond to life's challenges with a positive rather than a negative mindset. Mental fitness is crucial to our well-being and our carrying capacity as humans. When we intervene from a place of deep fatigue and burnout, we have less capacity to self-regulate and show up as our best selves. Mental fitness is also crucial to our success as interveners and as systemic leaders. Our inner states are contagious. We can shift the mood in a room intentionally or unintentionally. And we know this. We've walked into a room where the mood was dour and we've been pulled down by it. And we've also shifted it by cracking a joke or um, chatting with a friend. And we know that we can lift the mood or we can bring the mood down ourselves. This is powerful. So let's look at some of the research behind positive intelligence. It's a cross-disciplinary approach, pulling in ideas and research from neuroscience, cognitive behavioral psychology, positive psychology, and human performance science. The research includes results from hundreds of CEOs and executive teams, Stanford students, world-class athletes, and over 500,000 participants in a positive intelligence 6-week program from 50 countries. It's been summarized in a book that you can find called Positive Intelligence, written by Shirzad Chamine. So I'm going to dive into this and we're going to talk about brain states. and human states, and begin to use this terminology as we go through the module as the consistent way of looking at, sort of the modern version of the good wolf and the bad wolf. So the good wolf, the sage, is centered, creative, and fluid. They're higher up on the polyvagal ladder. They may be at sort of the edge of the sympathetic nervous system being activated, but being activated with a clean, centered, fluid way of intervening, more like a Jedi warrior. The saboteur, on the other hand, is triggered, reactive, and potentially stuck. So we can tell between these two different ways of being or showing up in our world, which one would be more useful most of the time. We can also see how these states show up on an MRI. So the sage brain is really in the prefrontal cortex primarily, and throughout the empathy circuitry in the body, includes parts of the right brain and also the cognitive functions of the left brain. The saboteur brain is really showing up in the brain stem and the limbic system, some of the older parts of our immune system, of our neural system. And it is an immune system, right, of sorts. It keeps us safe. And parts of the left brain. So what we know through this research, which was done as a means to look at the key factors that enable us to shift between these two states, is that there's only 3 core muscles or capacities that we need to develop. And the first is to intercept our triggers or our saboteurs. So to notice, basically. The second step is to, and maybe not in order actually, but the second state and the second set of muscles are to move into sage, into that calm, clear, and centered place. You see a positive, like a sign right there and a negative sign right there. And self-command is the capacity to choose where we want to be and take some action to get there. Our invitation to you is to take the saboteur assessment on the positiveintelligence.com website. It's free. They will not try to sell you anything. They will send you a series of emails over the next 5 to 7 days to provide a little bit more information and background to you about the research underlying and what you can do with your knowledge once you've identified your top saboteurs. So we're going to do a very quick overview for you. Everyone has the judge. The judge shows up in 3 ways. We judge ourselves, we judge others, and we judge events and circumstances. Think about it. You like a dress or you don't like a dress. You like somebody's shoes or you don't like their shoes. We don't realize that we're evaluating, assessing, and judging things as good or bad, black or white, kind of all the time. And then we have 9 saboteurs who come to the aid of the judge and say, oh, yes, this is terrible, or this is how we need to handle this situation or this person or ourselves. And so these saboteurs represent learned survival patterns, mostly developed in our younger years, in order to cope with and adjust to and adapt to the living conditions in our childhood home, which may have been wonderful. And yet still we needed to figure out how to be fed and how to be loved. And so we came up with strategies. And some of our strengths also were developed in those times as well, right? We have a very, very young brain, and we had to figure out how to be in the world and how to act and what worked and what didn't. Today, the 9 saboteurs, even though they may have been developed initially to help us cope and survive, have become self-sabotaging behaviors when we overplay them. So you might ask, are negative emotions good for you? Well, is a hot stove good for you? If you touch a hot stove, you immediately pull your hand off the hot stove. Our body knows to do this. This is part of our way of protecting ourselves. And yet somehow, when a negative emotion arises, we might find that we don't immediately stop focusing on that negative emotion. So here's the deal. Negative emotions are important and helpful for a second as an alert signal. Just like when you touch a hot stove, you know, boom, take it off. So negative emotions alert us that something needs our attention right away. And then if we can shift immediately back into our calm centered place, we can decide what it is that we need to do with that signal, with that new information that our body has and our emotional system, our nervous system has apprehended. The negative emotion can manifest as a saboteur. Self-command is the second muscle that we would use at this point in time when we've identified a saboteur. And it can take as little as 10 seconds. I'm going to take you through a very simple thing called a PQ rep, positive intelligence quotient rep. And you can place your thumb on your forefinger and just rub it back and forth with enough tension that you can feel the texture or the ridges on both your finger and your thumb. You might also be noticing temperature and tension. And as you rub your fingers together, just go ahead and notice your breath. And maybe notice your feet on the ground. We can do this under the table where nobody can really see that what we're actually doing is shifting our focus back into our body and away from the negative emotion so that we can handle whatever that emotion is trying to tell us with a calm, clear, and focused mindset. And then the third muscle that we want to grow as interveners is the sage power. Sage lives, as I mentioned, in the analytical part of the left brain and also in the right brain. And the sage powers are empathize, explore, navigate, innovate, and activate. So the sage lives in the regions of the brain where positive emotions, peace and calm, clear-headed focus, creativity, big picture thinking live. And the sage operates from the sage perspective, which basically says, who knows what is good and what is bad? Anything can be turned into a gift. We can cope and we can find our way forward. So if you're feeling stuck in negative emotions, it's pretty simple. Stop. You're in saboteur mode. Do some PQ reps to quiet the saboteurs and activate your sage. And assume the sage perspective if you can, or at least allow yourself to let go of the negative emotion. And we can also use the 5 sage powers to empathize, explore, navigate, innovate, and activate. So here's a question. You might be wondering, does this help me navigate the immune response in others? The answer is yes, with practice. When we are in sage mode, we have the capacity, and more skill to work with the immune response in other people. And we can potentially help them navigate back to sage. Although we shouldn't be fixated on that because people have to choose their own path. However, we can stay with them and hold the space for them. With practice, we can absolutely break free of our blind spots and stop self-sabotaging. So if life is like a journey down a river, to be stuck in a rigid coping mechanism that maintains problems is like being caught in a whirlpool on the side of the river. Not where there's solid flow and clean water, but actually where we can get quite stuck. So how do we handle this? How do we actually make this happen in real life? Well, we get triggered by something. An emotion is triggered, a negative emotion. And we have a choice point right here, right? We can allow ourselves to cycle and ruminate and relive and wonder about why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling, or why did this happen to me, or what is my problem? Or we can catch it using the saboteur intercept muscle. We can do some PQ reps. Rub our fingers together, feel our feet on the floor, take a deep breath. Before the amygdala hijack happens, before we get flooded with stress hormones, ideally, right? And then we can shift into sage mode after riding the emotion. Riding the wave of the emotion, which normally for simple things may only last about 90 seconds. That doesn't mean that our feeling, the underlying cause of the emotion or the trigger goes away. Think of a death in the family, right? That's not something you're going to recover from in 90 seconds. However, if you were triggered with anger because or regret because you didn't get there in time, and you decide to go into the vicious cycle, you can really spend days and hours and days there, long time there. Whereas if you choose to ride the wave, take a deep breath, let it flow through you, and allow it to dissipate naturally as you breathe, you can get through that intensity in a short bit of time. And then you can reflect on what happened and what needs to happen in order for you to be at your best, given the current and present circumstances. Because that's where we need to be, right? We need to know what can we do now and how can we be most effective right now, given what we know about both the past and what we anticipate in the future. So lasting positive change requires practice. And that's why this mental fitness is a practice. It's something that we need to do every day. So we're going to invite you to notice over the coming weeks, beginning now, when you find yourself judging, when you find yourself moving into one of your top saboteurs. And also, you can begin to notice when other people are triggered and work on having empathy for them when that happens. Work on having empathy for yourself when that happens. Doing some PQ reps, some deep breathing. If you're really having a hard time, go for a walk or do something to move your body. And then shift back into your calm, clear, focused center. So let's recap. We're going to start with ourselves. The problem is that the challenges of today can't be solved with our current carrying capacity. We are living in a VUCA world, and we're wired for physical threats more so than systemic complexity. We get easily triggered, and we trigger each other. Emotions are catching, and radical systemic change in the midst of an already VUCA world is near impossible unless we build this new capacity. The solution is to grow our capacity, our being states, our thinking, our way of thinking, relating, collaborating and acting from a sage state and a sage perspective. There have been many parallel movements and initiatives and frameworks that have been evolving, but what we also know is that indigenous wisdom, ancient wisdom exists. And so while maybe there have been many new things launched recently, this is something that our ancestors know is true, that we have these two major interstates and that we can choose between them. And why do we need to do this? We need to grow our capacity for our own well-being and as a means to become a better intervener with more influence and impact. In fact, our very survival as a species may depend on this. So what tools do we have for you? Well, we're introducing positive intelligence, mental fitness, which builds on these three muscles, and we'll begin to use this terminology regularly throughout the remainder of the course. And if you want to go further, you can look into that. You can look into the book, which is available in multiple forms. And there are learning programs that you can connect with me on and other positive intelligent coaches on. There are some inner development goal toolkits and resources, and we'll include something called the intentional conversation prep, which has us anticipate and begin to prepare to have a conversation with others and to anticipate their triggers and our own. So what's next? Complete your saboteur assessment and go and look into the personal integration session and prompts. Dive deeper into the 9 saboteurs, practice PQ reps, and do some journaling and notice how you can shift back into sage. This is a standard permitted use, which you've seen before. This material is here to help you and all of us to become better interveners. And many of the materials, as marked, are shareable within certain limitations. We've also introduced some third-party resources from positiveintelligence.com. And you can find links here and also specific content use and disclaimers. So thank you very much for being part of this work, and we'll see you in the next module.